I've recently been rewatching the new era Doctor Who episodes, more critically, trying to figure out how good I think each episode is, mainly based on characterization. And I watched Blink, and it stuck out to me as incredibly average. But hang on a minute, isn't this the best Doctor Who episode of all time? Isn't this supposed to be Moffat's masterpiece? Well, I disagree. Just how good do people think Blink is? Well, obviously that's a range. And the peak of that is thinking it's the best Doctor Who episode. And there are a lot of people who think that. But there are also a lot of people who don't. So, what about people who think Blink is bad? I think this is a very volatile episode. I understand how people can watch it once and think it's the best episode, despite it not being. But I could also understand why people would watch it and think it's bad, despite it not being. Not really. So, who thinks Blink is bad? Literally nobody. The least kind take I could find towards Blink was JXE in a very short clip in their ranking every 10th Doctor episode livestream. And Jay, despite stating that this list is exclusively about writing, doesn't even put Blink in bad. They put it in okay. Exactly 2 people on the timescales, Doctor Who episode rating website, I don't know, gave it a 5. Not even a single biased person or troll gave it a 4 or lower. Literally no one. I've looked so hard for anyone who thinks Blink is bad, and all I've found is the YouTuber who just so happens to do my favorite film analysis thinks the episode is mid. Except they don't even think the episode is mid. They just think the writing is mid.
The atmosphere carries the episode. It does, and we're talking about writing.
I'm here to present a hot take. I think the writing is bad. I think the episode is absolutely carried by the cinematography, sound design, and acting. But that still wasn't enough to save it from being mediocre. So in my opinion, there are 3 important parts to, well, storytelling in general, but especially Doctor Who. And they are plot, character, and theme. Blink doesn't have one of these. If I'm wrong, feel free to tell me what the theme of Blink was in the comments. That's not a challenge, I'm genuinely asking. Not saying this episode doesn't have themes, but it doesn't have a coherent, woven-in message or theme that it's exploring, which is what I would need to consider praising the themes of something. For example, The Impossible Planet and Satan Pit explore themes of belief, and rules, and what we accept as true. So that leaves character and plot. The plot of the episode is a mystery, so the logic and coherence of how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together matters, right? Right? Also, the episode is a horror. It's trying to be intense, so it needs clear and defined stakes. The last bit is characters. My philosophy on characters is somewhat simple. Every action and word we see and hear a character take tells us something about them. The more information about both their surface personality and deeper drives and mind you can communicate in the least amount of time, the better. Also, it would be nice if what you establish about the characters is relevant to the story.
If a bunch of characters have different perspectives on the ethics of cloning, and the plot I give them is an Olympic bike race, their differences are not going to shine. But if I put them in a plot where a clone has escaped the clone lab, I repeat, a clone has escaped the they're going to be at each other's throats.
Character arcs I feel like aren't necessary, but if you can establish an important part about your character, and then show us how it changes because of your story, that's extra points in my book. Also, characterization can come from either the writing, the physical words and actions the character takes, or the acting, subtle mannerisms and way they do things. So what's the biggest problem with this episode? I think the biggest problem with Blink is the speed of the Weeping Angels. Hear me out. This episode is a horror first, right? Like, that's the most important part of the episode, the suspense. And in my opinion, there is none. There's a theory about this episode that the Weeping Angels cannot move when being observed by anything, including the audience. Now, aside from the fact that this makes the suspense extremely cheap, basically the camera can just choose to focus on the angels whenever Moffat wants them to not be able to move. Aside from that, this theory is not impossible. There's even a moment where one of the angels that Sally cannot see but the audience can only moves once Sally's body obscures it from the camera. That really supports this theory, but there are also several moments in the scene where angels are off screen and they just don't move either, so...
Basically, there's nothing in this episode that makes this theory impossible, but nothing strong enough to make it obvious, in my opinion. However, just keep in mind that watching this episode without viewing it through the lens of this theory would be catastrophic for it.
For example, literally the clip I just played, Sally is taking something very important to the angels, and they're just sitting there. My assessment of the angel's speed will assume this theory is true, because even with the theory, they're still entirely broken. The first time we see the angel move, it has moved a slight amount over a whole night. If you've seen this episode, you would know the angel is not this slow, and I can't stress this enough. There is literally zero reason why this angel would want to move slightly closer to the house, except Moffat needs to make a creepy hint at what the angels are. Here, the angel takes 10 years to get to Kathy, and then teleports back to its original place in infinitely less time. There's no reason why the angel would choose to move this slowly, except Moffat wants to make the scene gradual to build suspense. Then we get to the key scene. The angels have the key for a reason, and are clearly trying to take Sally. Despite this, they move incredibly slowly and sometimes just don't move when no one, including the audience, is looking at them. But then when it's Billy, they can get him from this far away. Here, they take their eye off the statue for about 11 seconds, and it gets from here to just close enough to scare them, but not close enough to kill. Then Larry turns around, and again the statue gets just close enough to scare, not close enough to kill.
These two aren't even incongruent, it just feels cheap because I never know how fast the statues are gonna move.
Also, if you think maybe different statues move at different speeds, which doesn't fix the problem I just mentioned that this is actually about, the audience doesn't know if a character's in danger or not, because how fast the angels move per blink is entirely random. That theory would be wrong anyway, because the angel that moved this far in 11 seconds just took about 40 seconds to get from here to the bottom of the stairs. I think this scene is a great example of how this problem manifests and affects casual enjoyment, because on second, but you know what I mean, watch. This part had no tension for me because it looked like the angels were moving less and less with each light flicker. So the angel's speed may be pretty inconsistent, but one thing that does remain consistent is they only move a few feet per blink. Like, they can't just teleport across the street or something. Oh, god damn it. Here, we see the TARDIS in the police station garage, and then the next time we see it, the angels moved it to Wester Drumlin's. Through a busy street, without being seen once, by anyone. I would say, given how ridiculous this sounds, Moffat tried to hide it by never explaining or drawing attention to this fact in the episode, but he also just openly showed the angels teleporting across the street, so what do I know? So, I actually don't think these two are nearly as big problems as the inconsistent speed of the angels throughout the episode, because while they are objectively impossible, they just happen and then are done. But they are incongruent with the episode and might ruin it for some. Also, I would like to say, this isn't just a nitpick or something I went out of my way to find. On my second time ever watching this episode, I literally was not invested. I didn't feel any tension or suspense with the angels because I had no clue whether a character was in danger or not, because I didn't know how far the angels could travel in the span of a blink. I'm surprised so many people have watched this episode without noticing this. It's impossible for me to unsee it or ignore it. This episode is also a mystery. We are presented with a bunch of pieces that develop throughout the story. The answer all comes together with a bootstraps paradox. A bootstrap paradox is when something is sent back in time and then it becomes unclear where the origin of that thing was. For example, someone writes a transcript of a conversation between a TV man and a person in the future and then gives the transcript to the TV man so he can go back and have the conversation. Bootstraps paradoxes are cool. The problem is that the answer to the mystery in this episode is the bootstraps paradox. Which basically means the answer to every question is, well, that's what happened because that's what happened. Why did the doctor write those words on the wall? Because that's what happened. Why did the doctor tell Billy to tell Sally to check the DVD extras? Why did the doctor make the DVD extras? Because that's what happened. Why couldn't the doctor take Billy with him in the TARDIS and let him see Sally again as a young man? Because that's not what happened. This isn't inherently bad for a story, just not a good answer for a mystery in my opinion. It all comes across as very cheap. Moffat gets to make literally whatever he wants happen, and we just have to accept it because of the bootstraps paradox. Not a very satisfying conclusion to a mystery in my opinion. A couple non-speed related problems that lower the stakes. If the angels knew Sally and Larry were there in this scene, so they locked the door, they also could have just snuck up on them and killed them. But they didn't, because Moffat needs Sally and Larry to not leave so that they can find the TARDIS, but not be taken by an angel. Here, at the end of the episode, the Doctor pulls a genius move and tricks the angels into looking at each other, so now they'll never be able to move again. Unless this light turns off. Sally asks how the Doctor knows what she's saying, and the Doctor says,
"Look to your left."
Larry has a transcript of everything the Doctor says, and now he's writing in the bits that Sally is saying so that the Doctor can have them on his transcript, which he is reading the bits he's supposed to say. So him knowing what Sally says is actually entirely irrelevant. Larry could have never wrote what Sally says, and it wouldn't make a difference, which makes the line "look to your left" really dumb. But hey, the Doctor was just reading off the transcript of what he already said, so he wasn't actually choosing to say any of this, so you can't blame him. Also, Larry hasn't written down any of the timestamps in the transcript, so how does the Doctor know how long to wait in between what he's saying? Don't worry about it, shut up. Then the Doctor says,
"I've got a copy of the finished transcripts on my autocue."
Larry made this transcript. He has written tons about this video on the forums. Why has he seemingly just ignored this, especially when the next thing the Doctor says is, "I'm a time traveler, I got it in the future." Gee, I wonder what it could be referring to there. Seriously though, Moffat just decides when to ignore the fact that Larry knows this whole video by heart whenever it's convenient. I care about characters more than any other part of storytelling, so why am I talking about the characters last? Because I think they were the least important part of the story. I don't think the characters were Moffat's focus with this script. They don't get as much attention as other parts of the episode. So now that we've established that, at least from where I stand, the rest of this episode is squarely broken, let's talk about the characters and why they aren't great. What are Sally Sparrow's main character traits? Well, she consistently clings on to truth. When confronted with stuff that she thought was impossible, it really bothers her. After the writing on the wall fiasco, she immediately calls up a friend to talk about it and process what she just saw. When she first gets the letter from Kathy, who's been zapped back in time, she cannot believe it and explores every possible option that could be the case before even considering the possibility that it's true. Also, when the Doctor seemingly responds to her, she gets angry. And, that's basically it. I didn't find any other reoccurring or major character traits. She does show us that she's clever a few times, but to me that's very surface level. Also, she entirely contradicts that by deciding to go to Wester Drumlin's to watch the DVDs for literally no reason. Despite knowing the angels are there, and that everyone except her who has gone there has disappeared. Why would she go anywhere other than her or Larry's house? This is a stupid decision, but Moffat needs it to happen where them watching the DVDs is immediately followed by angels, and so that they find the TARDIS right away. Sally doesn't have any character arc, which isn't required, just, would have been nice. Sometimes when she does things only because Moffat needs her to for the plot, I find it hard to call it out of character because there's not much character for it to be in. Like when she takes the TARDIS key here, I know she only does this for the plot to happen, but it's not like there's anything about her character that goes against her doing this. Now, like I mentioned, I don't think this episode focuses on character, so I understand why she doesn't have a lot of depth, but that means even if her character functions to serve its purpose in the story, that purpose is still minor and not enough to save the episode from its other flaws. There's a really telling moment where she tells the Doctor she's angry because people have died, which, yeah, you would think that a three-dimensional character would have a reaction to the crazy stuff Sally's been through, but no, she just tells the Doctor she's angry, and then immediately shows us she isn't angry by joking with Larry.
Actually, never mind that. You can do shorthand.
She's an okay character. Again, the acting makes her really believable. But for a main character, she's not enough to make this episode good.
Kathy is a minor side character where only her personality and basic traits are relevant.
But they're clearly established and entirely consistent. She's excited about them investigating this house because she thinks it's cool. She also is immediately scared of a burglar despite being in the middle of nowhere in a broken abandoned building. She also lies about her age to the guy she likes.
Told him you were 18, you lying cow.
I really hope this is her lying because she's older than 18 and not younger. Because if she's younger, then yikes. Her personality just jumps off the screen, and I feel like this is a real person. There are people exactly like this. Lucy Gaskell's acting is also top-notch and sells this somewhat simple character.
Larry is a minor side character and only gets very little screen time, yet I think he's pretty well written. Apart from here, where, despite having watched this video so many times, he's surprised by the description of the angels. Aside from that, Larry is a very convincingly consistent nerd who is passionate about what he likes and is kind of fearful. Well, until here when he decides not to be because, I don't know. I don't even know if this is out of character. It's just not explicitly in character because Larry's too simple. I love this moment where he isn't even fazed by the doctor answering Sally because he knows everything the doctor is going to say very well. He also immediately tells Sally to give the angels the key when he finds out about it, which tells us his short-sightedness. He thinks the angels will let them go, and his fear and lack of confidence. He wants to survive no matter what he has to sacrifice. Again, he's a very simple character, but I think like Kathy, he serves his purpose in the story perfectly fine. How do I sum up Billy in one sentence?
Because life is short and you are hot. Drink.
Yep, that's it. That's literally all there is to his character. Now, he's only on screen for 3 seconds, so you know that's expected.
But then we have this emotional moment, which, mind you, hasn't been built up for Sally before this. We have no knowledge of how she values relationships or literally any build-up or context for what the events of the scene might mean to her. The only reason this scene works so well is the acting. Both young and old Billy have chemistry with Sally. All 3 actors are amazing at bringing this, bad script to life. I'm sorry, the script is not good. I'll be honest, this moment does nothing for me, and never has, because I know nothing about these people. And for those who do appreciate this moment, I would argue it's all in the acting. Not to say that's a bad thing, but wouldn't it be nice if it was well acted and well written? People like to say stuff like this line,
It's the same rain.
is well written, and while it's a cool line, Moffat did something which might not bother you, but I really hate, which is the lazy setup. Billy said,
It was raining when we met.
but given all the information he knows,
So I need you to take a message to Sally Sparrow. And I'm sorry, Billy. It's gonna take you a while.
he knows this is the same rain, and why would he mention that? Most of the scene is just exposition being delivered from characters that have very little depth or relationship established between them. Them being attracted to each other doesn't count, and I would like to mention that again, them being attracted to each other could have been really creepy, cringy, or just bad if the actors hadn't been on their A game. Now, I want to steer very clear of falling into the camp of saying,
I almost feel like if The Last Jedi was filled with overtly bad actors and looked overtly ugly, I feel like the plot inconsistencies and holes wouldn't be nearly as overlooked. It might actually just be the superficial stuff on the surface that have people going like, oh, it's a good movie, even though when you look deeper into it, it's pretty awful.
hot take, but I think that if a film has great acting, visuals, directing, editing, or music that helps distract people from poor writing, that makes it a better film, and those parts of the film should be praised for making it good. However, I like things that stand up to scrutiny, and rewatches. I noticed basically all of these problems, in at least some capacity, on my second watch of Blink. In my opinion, the great acting helps, but doesn't save the bad characterization. The mostly great cinematography and sound design doesn't make up for the entirely broken writing. The writing in this episode is just too inherently flawed to be saved by other parts of the production.
So 2 out of the 4 characters being well written, isn't that good, right? Well, considering they're both minor characters and the main character has no arc, no real goal throughout the story, Sally isn't even really that curious to tie into the mystery. She kind of just goes around and stuff happens to her. I think that's bad. Kathy and Larry as characters are well written to serve Sally in her journey, but Sally's journey is entirely shallow. She doesn't even really have a journey, not a thematic or emotional one, that is. Also, it's a detective story. That's the only format it comes close to fitting. And it's a bad detective story because all the clues only exist because of a bootstraps paradox, which basically means they happened because they happened. So now that we've gone over what I consider to be all the major flaws of Blink, do you still think Blink is one of the best Doctor Who stories? Maybe you do, and I would love to hear some counter arguments to what I've brought up in this video. But for me, this episode has never been very compelling, and there are clear, tangible reasons why. Things that, in my opinion, make Blink simply mediocre.